This video is going to talk about how you can create a data breach using Excel. Now, the context for this is that in August 2023 on the website What Do They Know? I'll just show you that here. There was a request for information about where people worked within the Northern Ireland Police Service. What actually happened was that in order to fulfill this, they provided that information, but they also provided an Excel spreadsheet. Now, within that Excel spreadsheet, there were the lists and the names of 10,000 people that were working in the police service at different levels. And what I want to do in this video is show you how that data breach may have occurred and how just being ignorant with Excel could have caused that problem, and maybe a little bit about what we can do about it. We're going to talk about 5 or 6 different ways in which this data could have been hidden. But if you want to get to the way in which I think it has actually been done, make sure you just skip ahead. Just use the links below and in the bar at the bottom to just skip ahead to the way in which I think this has happened. But actually, I think all of these, the things within here are actually worth looking at. Let's have a little look about the story. It was exposed in early August 2023. We know it's 10,000 people. We know that it was on this What Do They Know site. And we saw that the Police Service of Northern Ireland, they had to disclose that there was a data breach. So they ended up talking about that being the case. And you can see that according to this, police are investigating the circumstances that surround the release of data within a spreadsheet. Now, this is going to have massive ramifications, and prior to this, one of the biggest data breaches that we've seen has been with British Airways, but that wasn't necessarily Excel related. This is a big and it's a serious matter, and so what I'm going to do is going to show you within Excel how that might have occurred. So I've got a little Excel spreadsheet here. It is at 308k. It's really tiny, and if I go into the spreadsheet, you can see that we have got a load of cities here. What we're going to do is going to look through the different ways in which we can work with this and how we can hide the data in a way that we weren't quite expecting. So the chances are what actually happened was a pivot table was created. So if I go to insert pivot table, and I'm going to put it into a new worksheet. And then what I'm going to do on there is I'm going to put the population on the values, I'm going to put the city onto the columns, and I'm going to put the country onto the rows. In fact, that wasn't quite right. I put the city, no, I don't need that there. I'm going to put the country onto the rows, and then the capital, whether it's capital or not, onto the columns. So you can see that we've got some information here. Now, there's a very good chance that there's different ways in which this information could have been hidden from view. So the first way in which it could have been hidden would have been just by straight hiding. So we could do right click on there and we could hide this data. So it wouldn't be immediately obvious that that data was there. I'll undo that. Another way in which the data could have been hidden from view is if I just do I'm just going to do a small hide on this thing, but I'm just going to right click on this and show you that we could have hidden all of the rows. So if I hide it there, in fact, I could have just gone all the way down and you could just literally hide all the rows. And that would have made it a lot more difficult to see that the data was actually there. Let's just whiz up to the top, jump on there, right click, hide, and it wouldn't be immediately obvious that there was any data in this sheet at all. So there's 2 ways in which we can do it there. That was hiding the columns and then hiding the rows. And in fact, both of them were pretty good at actually stopping us from being able to see the data. And in both of those cases, you would have been able to see this information there. We've also got the ability to filter the data. And I don't know, let's just say I said the ISO was something like ABW, then you wouldn't be able to see as much information there. That would be another way of doing that. Another way in which we can make it so that the data isn't immediately obvious is by adding a load of columns. So if I do insert on there, and then I go back to the start here, it wouldn't be immediately obvious that there was any data there. There you go. So it's not obvious that there's any data there. And if I go to sheet 2, of course, the information is still there. The other way of doing it is a similar thing, but just with insert. Pop that in there. Now, I don't actually think that this is the way in which the breach would have taken place. That's going to happen at the end of this video. So one other thing that we could do is actually just, we can kind of cheat on this. We can just change the font. So if I just go onto here and then I change the font color and make it white, you'd see that it wouldn't be immediately obvious. Now, obviously, because it's a table, it's a bit more obvious that the data is there. So if I wanted to table design and I had a little look at here, and I would clear the table design, you know, that data is still there, but you wouldn't even be able to see it. So that would be a way of doing it. It'd be a very unusual way of doing it, but it would work nonetheless. So that's another way in which you could do that. In fact, you could also change the size of the font. It would be a really peculiar way of stopping the data from being seen. So let's just play with that. Make it as maybe a 2. Yeah, you can see the data is still there, but it's actually only 2 in size. Now I'm going to move on to the kind of more likely ways in which this could have been, where the breach could have taken place. Now, one thing that we can do is we can go onto the sheet and we can just straight hide the sheet. So I'm going to right click on there and then I'm going to hide it. Now that sheet still exists. But it's not immediately obvious, and if you were trying to review this, you'd be going, actually, yeah, fine, there's just one sheet in there, but of course there isn't one sheet. We can actually see, if I go to unhide, we can see that we can unhide this sheet 1. I'm going to call this sheet data. Now I'm going to show you what is probably the way in which the data got exposed, even through a review process. So I'm looking at this sheet here. We can see that we've got our pivot table here. I'm just going to call the sheet pivot. And you can see you've got a data table here. Now, if you right click on here and you delete it, completely delete the data. I'm going to delete this. Do you want to continue? I'm going to select delete. And the data's gone. But actually, it's not gone at all. So in actual fact, if you actually double click on any of the cells, you'll be able to see all of the data that has that it makes up this makes up the table. So I'm just going to jump up to there, and if I just double click on here, it's just a feature within a pivot table. Double click on there, and all that information is still there. It's just a feature within a pivot table. I can do the same thing if I just double click on Yemen, and then I can see all the data within there. It's kind of a nice feature in its own way, but in actual fact, we can see that it's it is potentially the way in which the data would have been exposed. Now I'm going to show you one further way in which the data could have been exposed, and then I'm going to finish up this video. The way in which I'm going to do that, I'm going to actually come out of this, and we're going to go into this again, going back into the spreadsheet. There's nothing been done to it, and I'm going to show you that we can actually go into that data, and we can actually create what we call a data model, and that is another way in which this data might have been exposed. So I am now going to go onto there, and I'm going to go on to data, and I'm going to do it from the table, and this is going to bring up something called Power Query. And what we're going to do with that is we are now going to go through there, and we're going to add something into our I've got my data. I'm not really fussed about what I'm going to do with it at the moment, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do close and load 2, and I'm going to go onto there and then click add this to the data model and then click OK. And the key to this is that later on I will delete the data. In fact, I didn't really mean to actually bring it in like this, but it is still in the data model. So we should be able to just click delete on there. Permanently delete this sheet, wonderful. You can actually see that data is still there. And in fact, I'm just going to do a test sheet here because I need to have test there. Go onto there, and I'm going to delete this data here as well. Permanently delete it. So now I've got a spreadsheet here which apparently has got no data whatsoever. I'm going to do file and save as. And I'm going to call this cities data model. Now we have a data model. I'll show you how to get to that in a moment. And let's just have a look at this. So it's actually city data model. It's a slightly bigger thing. And what we can see on there is that you might think there's absolutely nothing in there at all. And so what we can do on there is we can go on to Power Pivot, and we can go on to Manage on this data model. It might ask us a question, it might not, but the data is still there. And so this is another way in which this data could have been exposed, and it would have been clearly unhelpful. So I'm going to come out of this now. You can get this data out quite easily. You can see that it's got all of the lines of data. It says 1 of 4,683. So we can see that data is definitely there. I'm going to come out of this now. So finally, I'm actually just going to do file, and I'll open the cities spreadsheet. I'm then going to create another pivot table and show you maybe what could have been done differently. So I'm going to go into, on to insert, pivot table, from table range, into the existing worksheet. No, go into a new worksheet, lovely. And I'm then going to do the same thing as I did before, columns on there, population onto values, and I'm going to put country onto here. And this time round, I'm going to sort of see, well, can we export this data in a way that is actually not going to expose all the information. So I'm going to do file, and then I'm going to do save as. And what we're going to do is we just turn it into a CSV file. Now that will actually only provide us information in relation to the very first sheet, and then I'm going to press save on there. Cities, I'm going to call this underscore CSV, and I'm going to click save on there. It doesn't support multiple sheets, and then I'm going to select OK on that. So I'm going to come off this, and we're just going to have a look in our folder. So as you can see, we've got our cities CSV file. I know I've called it csv.csv, but in actual fact, this one is actually only 7K in size. It's absolutely minute. And if we jump into it here, we'll actually see that the spreadsheet will open. And you can see that this time around, you are literally just getting the data. There is no ability to drill into this at all. You can double click on it as many times as you like. All you're getting is the data, and that's what should have happened. It would have been a far better way to have distributed the data by using a CSV file. There is literally nothing other than the data that you can see there, and it's a much simpler thing to be able to check if you want to see if there's anything under the hood, whereas Excel significantly more difficult to do so. That takes us to the end of this tutorial. It's really important that people know how to work correctly with Excel when they're in terms of just understanding how much information they're sharing at any point in time. Don't share information outside your organization, in short. And if you are trying to share information, use an Excel spreadsheet. I mean, there's nothing really much more serious than the data breach that took place in Northern Ireland, where they exposed the data of police officers in an area where the terrorist threat level is severe. But in your case, you may be sharing information that you don't realize you're sharing. So make sure you share this share this video with people you know, and come back to it some other time. And I hope you found it useful. So please make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you in future videos.